each of us, there is another whom we do not know. He speaks to us in dreams and tells us how differently he sees us from the way we see ourselves. Carl Jung. Why were you born into a family that wounded you? Why did the very people entrusted with your protection become the source of your deepest pain? Why did you come into a home where love was conditional, presence was absent, and silence was safer than truth? What if I told you it was not a punishment but a calling? I invite you to reflect. And if you are willing, share in the comments below. What was the emotional climate of the family you were born into? What pain have you carried? You are not alone. You were never alone, though it felt like it. To understand why you were born into a toxic family, you must begin by seeing what others cannot. That family is not simply a unit for survival. It is a crucible for the soul, and the soul does not choose comfort. It chooses growth. It chooses encounters that will crack the ego, expose the shadow, and awaken the hidden self. You see, long before you had language, long before your mind could form reason, your nervous system absorbed everything, every shout, every silence, every withheld affection, every distortion of reality. All of it became the architecture of your inner world. Your sense of self was built inside an environment that taught you to split who you were. The real you, raw, intuitive, emotional, sensitive, was too much for them. So you learned to adapt. You learned to shrink. You learned to survive by abandoning your own truth. But the soul does not forget what the ego represses. That part of you, the one who was never allowed to be, is still there. That child still speaks through anxiety, through depression, through people-pleasing, through rage, through numbness. And beneath every self-sabotaging pattern is a spiritual truth. The part of you that suffered the most is also the part that holds your key to freedom. We inherit more than genes from our families. We inherit unfinished stories, unlived dreams, denied emotions, ancestral burdens. You were born into a lineage not just of people, but of pain generations of shadow, passed down unspoken. And here you are, the one who sees it, the one who feels it, the one who cannot pretend. This is not an accident. The unconscious seeks healing through those who are awake enough to carry the torch. You did not ask for this role, but something in you said yes to the work. You were born to end cycles, to bring what was hidden into the light, to transform pain into wisdom, repression into expression, fear into love. And for that, you had to experience the wound firsthand. There is no other way. You do not become conscious by thinking about light. You become conscious by descending into darkness, into the places your family never dared to go, into the emotions they taught you to deny, into the patterns they forced you to inherit. Because when you walk into the shadow, when you no longer run, when you say, "I will not pass this on," you change everything. But this change is not easy. To be born into a toxic family is to be born with a contradiction. You long for connection, but you fear intimacy. You yearn to be seen, but you hide. You want to feel safe, but your nervous system only knows vigilance. You speak, but you edit yourself in real time. You love, but you wait for it to be taken away. You succeed, but feel guilty. You fall apart, but feel ashamed. This is the internal chaos of the awakened child in an unconscious system. But this chaos this dissonance, this pain, it is not just a sign of brokenness. It is the raw material for transformation. The alchemist does not turn gold from joy. Gold is made from lead, and your lead is the unspoken agony of your early years. If you were gaslit, neglected, controlled, criticized, manipulated, ignored, compared, blamed, then you know what it means to carry pain that has no name. And that pain, if not met with truth, becomes identity. It becomes personality. But personality is not destiny. What you call your anxiety, your depression, your low self-esteem, these are not disorders. They are adaptations, protective responses to the unbearable tension of loving people who hurt you and being unable to leave. You survived by becoming what they needed you to be. But now, the soul is calling you back to who you really are, to reclaim what was exiled. The question is not, why was I born into this? The real question is, what will I do with the truth I now carry? Because now you see it. The games, the silence, the control, the guilt, the projection. You see that the roles are not real. You see that the stories were not yours. You see the cost of pretending. And once you see, you cannot unsee. But seeing is only the beginning. You must then choose to become the self that was buried beneath the survival strategy. And that means facing grief, the grief of the childhood you never had, the love you never received, the safety you were never granted. You must grieve not to drown, but to free the energy trapped in the past. You must stop trying to fix what never wanted to be healed. You must accept that some people are committed to their illusions and that your job is not to save them, but to save yourself. And you must stop living your life as a reaction to their unconsciousness. When you are born into a toxic family, you often grow up either becoming who they wanted or rebelling against who they wanted. But either way, your life is still tethered to their energy. And freedom begins when you stop reacting and start creating. When you ask, not what did they want me to be, but who am I? Truly, beneath all of it, this is where your power lives. To become yourself fully, even when they cannot recognize you. To speak your truth, even when it threatens the fragile harmony they maintain. To choose your path, even when it leads away from them. And perhaps the hardest, to love yourself, even if they never did. You do not have to hate them to heal, but you do have to be honest about what happened. You do not have to sever every tie, but you do have to stop betraying yourself to keep them comfortable. You do not have to make them see, but you do have to see yourself clearly and choose to honor that vision. Because your life is not a stage for their unresolved emotions. Your body is not a container for their projection. Your future is not a graveyard for their unfulfilled dreams. You are here to live your own truth. And truth, once spoken, becomes a force that nothing can contain. You were born into a toxic family because your soul chose to bring consciousness where there was none. You are not cursed. You are called. You are called not because you are better than those who came before you, but because you are willing to see what they could not. Because something in your being refused to normalize dysfunction. Because something in your heart could not surrender to the narrative that pain is love and silence is peace. You were called to bring clarity to confusion, wholeness to fragmentation, and voice to generations of what went unspoken. But calling does not feel like a blessing at first. In the beginning, it feels like exile. You find yourself torn between loyalty and truth, between who they want you to be and who you know you are, between the comfort of belonging and the cost of becoming. You begin to realize that the price of authenticity is often rejection, that being awake in a sleeping system makes you an outsider, that peace is not found by keeping others happy, it is found by becoming whole, even if it means walking alone. That walk into aloneness is terrifying, but it is sacred for many who were born into toxic families. Individuation. The process of becoming your true self is not a luxury. It is a matter of soul survival. You either wake up and begin the painful process of self-liberation, or you slowly disintegrate into a life that was never yours to begin with. And the disintegration is subtle. You lose joy. You numb out. You attract relationships that mirror your childhood. You abandon your dreams to avoid rocking the boat. You live in a cage, but tell yourself it's a castle. The truth is, your soul does not want comfort. It wants coherence. It wants to live in alignment with itself. That is why you were chosen not to fix them, but to find yourself. And in finding yourself, you may have to walk through the fire of guilt. Guilt for saying no. Guilt for setting boundaries. Guilt for not rescuing them. Guilt for leaving the dysfunction behind. Guilt. Because you were trained to believe that love means sacrifice, that being a good son, daughter, or sibling means carrying burdens that were never yours to carry. But guilt is not always a signal of wrongness. Sometimes, guilt is a sign that you are doing something radically new, that you are disrupting generations of unconsciousness, that you are choosing self-respect over enmeshment, and that choice it matters. Because when one person breaks a cycle, the entire lineage feels it. You may never receive the apology you deserve. You may never be validated by those who hurt you, but you are not healing for their approval. You are healing for your own liberation and for the unseen descendants who will one day thank you for it. Healing is not forgetting. It is remembering who you were before the world told you to be someone else. And from that remembrance comes power. The power to no longer perform. The power to no longer stay silent. The power to no longer participate in what harms your soul. The power to love from truth, not from guilt. This power does not arise overnight. It unfolds slowly, through practice, through tears, through reclaiming the body and breath and boundaries that were once violated. To be born into a toxic family is to be initiated early into pain, but it also means being initiated early into wisdom. Wisdom that others spend decades running from. You have learned what betrayal feels like, what emotional starvation feels like, what loneliness inside a full house feels like. And because you have known that really known, that you now hold the capacity for depth, for compassion, for empathy, for fierce love. Your scars are not shameful. They are sacred. They are the evidence that you have lived, that you have felt, that you have survived what was meant to crush your spirit. But you are not here to just survive. You are here to thrive. And to thrive, you must give yourself permission to rewrite the script. The script that says family is everything even when it's abusive. The script that says blood is thicker than boundaries. The script that says your role is to absorb, to fix, to be the emotional shock absorber for everyone else's pain. No, you are allowed to outgrow your family. You are allowed to choose peace over connection. You are allowed to love people from afar, or not at all. You are allowed to define what family means to you not through biology, but through reciprocity, through safety, through shared respect. This redefinition is not selfish, it is spiritual, Because the family you create in truth is more healing than the family you remain loyal to in pain. You are not betraying anyone by becoming who you are. You are honoring the self they could not see. You are bringing consciousness to where there was none. And perhaps, one day, your transformation will ripple back through the lineage, and others will wake up too. Perhaps not. But that is not your job. Your job is your own soul. To care for it, to protect it, to listen to it, to love it back to life. When you do that, the toxicity loses its grip. The hooks fall away. The internalized voices grow quiet. You stop living on autopilot. You stop recreating your childhood through adult relationships. You stop looking for redemption in the same people who hurt you. You begin to write a new story, one rooted not in survival, but in sovereignty, one built not on fear, but on freedom. You begin to choose relationships that nourish rather than drain. Work that expresses your gifts rather than masks your pain. Environments that reflect your truth rather than demand your silence. This is the gift of being the one who sees, but it is not always obvious. Sometimes your healing looks like crying on the floor at 3 a.m. Sometimes it looks like telling a parent you can't visit this holiday. Sometimes it looks like walking away from people who say, "But we're family." Sometimes it looks like forgiving, not because they asked, but because you no longer want to carry the poison. Sometimes it looks like starting over, from scratch, with nothing but your intuition, your fire, and your truth. But from this foundation, you rise, not as a version of who they needed you to be, but as the embodiment of who you came here to become. The healer, the cycle breaker, the truth teller, the one who stopped pretending, the one who returned to their soul. You were born into a toxic family, not to be destroyed by it, but to be awakened through it. And awakening is not easy. It costs everything that is not real. But what you receive in return is beyond what you could have imagined yourself. Fully, freely, finally. You are not your story. You are the storyteller. You are not your pain. You are the presence that holds it. You are not your trauma. You are the truth that transcends it. You are the one you've been waiting for. And now, you are here. Welcome home.